Welcome to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. Educate. Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Good morning, and welcome to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. Today, the subject is Be the Difference, Vote. And this is indeed a way to be the difference by voting. We have two special guests today, and I'm going to introduce them right now. We have Lupe Solis and Steve Jennings. Lupe Solis is a community advocate. She is retired, but she worked for AARP as the advocacy director, which now Steve has been doing that job for several years. I was actually counting that AARP celebrated its 60th anniversary, right? And between the two of you, you actually have over 40 years of advocacy experience in relationship with the work of AARP in the advocacy arena. So that is an amazing thing. So Lupe, welcome to our show once again.
Thank you, David. Thank you for having me.
Steve Jennings, you are the current director of advocacy, and you've also been involved with AARP. First of all, welcome to our show.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I started actually in Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City.
Yeah. Circuitously, I worked my way over to Rhode Island, and that's where I moved to Phoenix from. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So that how many years?
27.
27.
But only part of that's been in advocacy. I had to work my way up and following in Lupe's footsteps here.
Well, more than half of AARP's age, you've been involved in the last half, say, of AARP's work in the country, because AARP is a nonpartisan nationwide membership organization. And I mean, I'm also an employee of AARP, so today is the day of AARP, I suppose, right? Thank you so very much. You know, AARP launched a campaign, and this is a critical campaign, and this is what we're going to be talking about today. The campaign is called Be the Difference, Vote. That's where we got the name Be the Difference, Vote. That's the name of the campaign. I would like to read something that our founder, Ethel Percy Andrews, you know, our founder was such an amazing person. She founded the NRTA first.
National Retired Teacher.
Right, AARP. And she said the following: we must concern ourselves with the men and women who offer themselves as candidates for those posts of honor and responsibility. We must make it our duty to study the situation we and they face, and, to the best of our considered judgment, decide for ourselves what we want their desired post to be and to achieve. Next, choose that candidate whose past activities seem to be similarly motivated. So these are words by our founder, Ethel Percy Andrews. So I typed a series of questions that I would like to ask, the two of you and carry out this conversation, because, again, it is a campaign, and we're going to describe it in the next, 40, 50 minutes. AARP has been an advocate for the 50-plus and their issues for 60 years now, and you both have participated in over 40 years of that advocacy effort. What has that experience been like? And either of you.
Well, certainly, AARP, as you put it so well, has protected the issues of people 50 plus. But in reality, those issues affect the whole family. The fact that as seniors retire, they have a steady income, that they have something they can count on in their Social Security and their Medicare, makes it a lot easier for families as a whole to be able to be with their loved ones without having that full support of them, which used to be the case before 1960 and also before Social Security was enacted. So when we talk about the issues that affect the elderly, we really are talking about issues that affect the whole family,
Right.
and issues that younger people should be looking to. Social Security, Medicare, even Medicaid, which in many cases takes care of long-term care for the elderly, but also takes care of a lot of young families and their children. And we've always been on the line supporting child health care. So I think that when you talk about AARP being a defender of issues for 50 plus, people should realize that those issues affect the whole family.
That's right. Thank you, Lupe. Steve?
Well, she makes a good point because, older people love their children and they love their grandchildren and they want to see the best for their entire family. And, AARP nationally has about 36 million members, and we do surveys of our membership. And again, over the 60-year history of the organization, these surveys have shown that older Americans are more than happy to even be self-sacrificing for their children and their grandchildren because they are the future. So it's inspiring to actually work with older people, and it's been a lifetime of learning for me. I've worked for AARP for 27 years, and it's constant inspiration. Just like Lupe. Lupe used to work for AARP, and now she's retired from AARP, but she's still involved as a volunteer with AARP because she believes passionately in those issues.
Right. And, it must be quite an experience for the both of you to be linked to Washington, D.C., because when you're an advocate, you are linked to Washington, D.C. pretty much every single day. And I'm sure that that has been the case for many, many years.
It has, and in many ways, for example, in my experience, I had worked for many years for state government in a position of also advocacy for the elderly. But when I came to AARP and they showed me the write-up of the description of the position, I thought, oh, my God, this is not only my job. This is what I love to do.
Right.
And do it in a setting that doesn't tie you to political issues. It doesn't tie you to partisanship.
Right.
It's about helping people and helping them in the best possible ways.
Right.
Yeah, and even with Washington, it's a very personal thing. It's when we meet with our federal legislators, believe it or not, they like to be called by their first name. And if you call them congressman or senator, they say, "Oh, please, David." And the other thing is that your local politicians that we always say, well, it's not going to make any difference if I vote who gets elected president. But really, it's these local politicians that work their way up. The city councilmen become mayors, mayors become state senators. And we just saw a state senator, Debbie Lesko, become a congressman. So that's how it happens. Barack Obama was a U.S. senator and then became a U.S. president. So
now the having organizations that advocate for people is critical. I mean, one can advocate individually, but I believe you would agree that you can never compare the individual advocacy in terms of the impact that it can have with an organization such as AARP with 36 million strong. Why is it important to have an organization such as AARP on your side and be advocating?
Well, David, number one, because those that don't have a voice, are usually the people that don't get protected. And that is, I think, the advantage that AARP has, that it has a national voice. It's a well-respected organization. People know that we can be trusted. We do surveys. They do research. They really represent the voice of the people. And I can truly put it to you this way. The membership of AARP is partisan as anything else in life is. There's Republicans, there's Democrats, there's independents, there's libertarians, all the gamut.
Right.
But nevertheless, there are certain things that unite us.
Certain issues
that unite us. And that unity is the ability that I think is the advantage that AARP has, that we're able to look at the overall picture and say, this is what's good for all. Because our people have told us that. And while you're right that it's important for organizations to represent, sometimes if those organizations are not based on what the community or the people are saying and wanting, then we have problems. And as you well know, right now it's a critical time in our political life.
Right.
And I mean that in the best sense of the word, not necessarily, partisan. But we have some serious issues.
Right.
Our politicians are not seeking common ground. They are casting insults instead of creating results. So it's time for politicians to put the voters first and get to work.
Right.
And I think this is what brought AARP to the table and said, okay, this year we will make a concerted effort to get our voters out to out to vote and express their sentiments, because it is a critical time.
And that is basically the campaign. The campaign, Be the Difference Vote. It's a campaign, and we're asking people to be involved. In one way is to sign a pledge, and there's a way to sign a pledge, and we'll be inviting people to sign a pledge that they will vote. We'll get into that in just a bit. Steve, how strong is the reputation of AARP in the advocacy arena, in the country in general, and in Congress specifically? How strong is the reputation of AARP?
Well, we're stronger. We're getting stronger. There's agencies that, put out their opinions of who the most powerful lobbies are. And, it depends on who's in the White House in one sense, but it's not unusual for AARP to be named the most powerful lobby in the country. It's sometimes it's the National Rifle Association is also listed as the most powerful. Like I say, it depends on what party's in power. But we have offices in every state. We have people that do advocacy in every state. We have hundreds of thousands of volunteers across the nation that older people vote and contact their decision makers. The politicians know that the older vote is often critical. And so we are a very powerful organization with big issues to take on: Social Security, Medicare, long-term care, how to have enough money as you get older, how to make sure that your increased health care expenses are covered. These are not simple issues. And so it takes an organization like AARP working with the other organizations that represent people to assert themselves, because at Congress or the State House, if you go up there here in Phoenix, do this sometime during the legislature, go up there and you'll see that it is full of well-paid lobbyists, some of them getting paid hundreds of dollars an hour. Every industry is represented up there, and they constantly want all the legislators' ears. It's even worse in Congress. So the only way is to have an organization and for the public to be involved, not only in voting, but in contacting the legislators. We like to say it takes an organization, but us organization lobbyists, we love it when one person can come up with their personal story and talk about how a proposal or an existing law affects them, because that's the other thing. The legislators get tired of listening to the lobbyists for organizations. They like to hear from the public. That's personal, and that works.
So basically, you definitely need an organization as powerful as AARP with 36 million strong, but you cannot just give up your right thinking, oh, okay, I have this organization helping me to advocating for me. You're saying that you still, as an individual, have the responsibility and the duty to still contact your legislators.
If you don't come up, we have a lot less power.
Right.
That's right.
Because they get tired of listening to us, don't they, Lupe?
So
That's true.
the message gets across when an individual calls or shows up at the office.
And even if you are not able to show up, staying abreast of what's happening, not giving up your right to participate in the system. It is very important that people remember that it's a privilege that we have to be able to vote. And when 50% of people don't show up at an election, then you've got a problem.
Right.
Because the other 50% are deciding what life should be like for all of us.
Right.
So it's important that people remember that you must exercise that right and that privilege.
Right. We're going to have to go on our first break. You are listening to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. We'll be right back.
Welcome to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. Educate. Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Thank you. Thank you for staying with us. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection, with a very, very important subject today. It is called Be the Difference, Vote. And this is actually the name of an AARP campaign that it launched in May of 2018, this year, of course. We have Lupe Solis and Steve Jennings with us to help us describe what this campaign is all about. We are talking about how critical it is to have organizations such as AARP with its members, the power of its members. Members give AARP the power to advocate. I mean, a lot of times people, think, why would AARP want to be so big? Well, the more members AARP has, the more power it has to advocate, because power is in numbers, as we know. So now there is a big issue with what the concept of general elections and then the midterm elections. And there seems to be a lot of people participating, and actually most of the national politicians wants to make everything all about the big election, but then the midterm elections like almost kind of overlook, and there's a drop in numbers who participate. Can you help us understand what is the difference between a general election and then a midterm election? What is that concept?
Well, number one, the general election is usually when you have a presidential election, and people come out. They get excited, and everybody comes out and vote. But then every other year, every 2 years, we're electing almost every member of Congress. And those are called the midterm elections. And in non-presidential elections, the vote drops drastically.
Mm-hmm.
But the 50-plus vote is a very important vote because it has helped grading electoral outcomes, because a 50-plus voter is a very reliable voter. He tends to vote regularly and in every election. But just as a point of reference, in the 2016 presidential election, the 50% voters pretty much decided the outcome of the 50-plus voter pretty much decided the outcome of that election, where 90.5% of registered voters age 50 plus participated in the election.
Wow.
That is a tremendous number, and we must make sure that we don't drop off, because then in the 2014 elections, only 75.2 of registered voters age 50 plus vote. And we have an upcoming election this year in November. And we want to make sure that people realize the importance of getting out there. Your vote counts. People sometimes say, oh, well, it's just one. Well, elections have been decided by as little as 10 votes.
Wow.
And so it's very important.
So just to recap, general elections typically refer to presidential elections.
Correct.
And then the midterm more to congressional.
Well, congressional, but also at the state level.
At the state government.
And you've got mayors. And you've got, local.
And there's a big drop, you're saying, that
drop.
people tend to focus on the general and just kind of like forget about the midterms.
Yeah, well, this time, in 2018, we're not have a president running. That'll be in 2020.
Right.
And we've got the whole U.S. House of Representatives. Their terms are 2 years, see? So every congressman, 435 of them nationally, are up for election. That's 9 of them in Arizona.
All of them, huh?
All of them are up for election. And then the governors in 36 states are having governor
More
elections
than
this
half.
year, including Arizona.
Including Arizona.
Our governor
This year, 2018.
This year.
And in Congress, there's 35 of in the U.S. Senate, there's 35 of the 100 seats are in play this election. They're elected for 6-year terms. The U.S. Senate was meant to be further away from the day-to-day noise of the issues so that they would have a more thoughtful approach, hopefully. I'm not sure it's worked out that way. But so they have 6-year terms. About 35 of them are in play. So, and there's a good chance that, the U.S. House of Representatives could change hands and the Democrats.
What do you mean change hands, right?
Well, here's what happens after an election. Both parties have a meeting, and the Republicans get together and the Democrats get together. And whoever got the most seats, whichever party, there's a fight that happens within that party. And currently it's the Republicans. And whoever wins that fight becomes the Speaker of the House. I'm using the House of Representatives.
Right.
And then they appoint all their buddies, so to speak, their supporters, as the chairs of all the committees. And the chair of the committee is a very powerful person. They set the agenda. They call on people to speak. They decide what experts to bring in. That's how they control
That's how
the
critical it is, huh?
Oh, yeah. And so as well as Lupe was saying, we've got city mayors and city council people running, school boards. How important is that? Local. They all like to say all politics is local, but you always think, well, I don't have to vote. The president isn't running.
Right.
But there's a lot more than that going on.
That's
There's
amazing.
a lot going on,
is amazing.
And I think that people must remember that whoever gets elected, and especially in those special positions of power, chairmanships of committees and what have you, they set the tone for the public policy direction of our country. And especially for the 50-plus voter, it's extremely important that we remain a very big block of voters that are protecting and defending the rights of individuals, particularly the older American. But also, as I said before, it affects whole families.
Now, this campaign, Be the Difference Vote, has an emphasis on the 50-plus segment of our population. Obviously, data must show that these are the people who usually vote the most. Is this something that is being highlighted in this campaign?
Definitely, but again, because we are a powerful voting bloc, you also must remember that when you drop 25% in off-year elections, that is a huge drop. And if we do that, who are very constant voters, imagine what happens in the rest of the population, who are usually not really attuned to what's going on except at presidential election years. So it's very important that people turn out to vote. And that's why AARP is going to work so diligently to make sure that people remember, and have access to information where they can register, where they can come to vote. It's not about what you vote like or whatever. That's your decision. But our effort is to make sure you vote this year.
Right.
Yeah, that's as a nonpartisan organization, that means that nonpartisan means we're not on one side or another. We do push issues. Yeah, and many issues are important to older people and their families, but we don't push candidates. We don't have a political action committee that gives candidates money. AARP does not. We don't push political parties or candidates. We push issues. There's a lot of groups that do that. The NRA is like that. The Girl Scouts are like that. The American Red Cross is like that. And we try and solve things that way. Aging, getting old in America is not a partisan, a Republican or a Democrat thing. So we, since so many older people vote, 90%. Vote, and in AARP members even more, and in Arizona we just got a little bit more now than 890,000 AARP members. That's about 38% of everybody in Arizona that's 50 and over. Since so many of them are voting, why aren't the politicians paying attention to the issues that affect them and their families? Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, financial security, and health care. So we, as an organization, this election, are looking to drive those issues, make the politicians pay attention to the older voters and their issues and the things that are good for their families and their children and their grandchildren.
And AARP typically is pretty successful when they carry out campaigns. So this, again, the whole issue of this, Be the Difference Vote, then, is to inform, to motivate the voters to engage in midterm elections, which tends to be a big drop in this type of elections. And there's all kinds of venues or avenues that AARP will use in driving that message. I mean, I know we have the magazine, we have the bulletin, and what other vehicles do we use typically to, you're talking about 36 million people. I mean, just the magazine alone reaches what it has, like a 30 million plus circulation. So it has a big infrastructure of communications to get a message across.
It certainly does, including, of course, social media.
Right.
But the campaign currently will include, for example, things like today. We're
Right.
talking about why it's
Right.
important. So they will certainly have informational shows that will talk about different issues, because when we consider the national issues, the Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, we also have to consider that those affect us at the local level as well as caregiving. There's 40 million Americans out there taking care of somebody.
800,000 in Arizona. 800,000 family
in Arizona
caregivers.
alone. So those are issues that should not only interest you, but should cause your participation, because whatever is decided ultimately affects how you handle those needs when your family comes to need them. But you were asking, what other ways will we be doing? Well, we'll be hosting public events. But it's important to reiterate again that we do not endorse candidates or elected officials. We do not give money to campaigns of partisan campaigns. We do not donate to political action committees. We are not a PAC. But we do advocate, as you said before, on issues that affect us all. And we work across political lines. And I'm sure that Steve will give you a couple of stories about when we've been considered to be either too Democrat or too Republican. But we will be hosting and holding public events and do some phone banking, maybe canvassing door to door, maybe not in every state, but in some of them where the issues require it. And we certainly will be engaging people in conversations about what's important and why.
Yeah, David, the AARP will have two levels of campaign, a national campaign and a local campaign. And the national campaign will use a lot of the same techniques other campaigns use. They'll use social media and ads in social media. They'll do direct mails to our membership. They'll do robocalls at the last minute, and a number of other tactics. And as you say, the magazine is AARP. The magazine is the largest circulation magazine in the world, and
Right.
And then we've got our newsprint publication called the AARP Bulletin that tends to focus on politics. Locally, we'll use an interesting tactic that I think you've probably talked about on this program before, teletown halls. There's technology out there with the internet that can call 100,000 people in 20 minutes
Right.
and invite them to participate from the safety of their living rooms in it's kind of like a talk show, like your radio program.
So some of the AARP members who may be listening to this show might be getting a call when we do have this teletown
That's right.
hall.
And sponsored, we'll have candidates after the primary. We've got the August 28th primary. After that is when we'll know who the candidates running for each party are running against each other. At that point, we'll offer them to be on an AARP-sponsored teletown hall. We'll call 100,000 of our members, and you'll get to hear from each of them if they agree to appear.
Right. Thank you so very much. When we come back, we are going to be getting deeper into the issues, because it's all about the issues in the end. Stay with us. You are listening to AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. We'll be right back.
Welcome to AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. Educate. Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Thank you. Thank you for staying with us. This is AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection with the subject today, Be the Difference, Vote. This is a campaign that AARP launched earlier this month, May 2018. And again, Lupe Solis and Steve Jennings are our guest. It is very interesting that when one hears the political messaging, if you will, rhetoric, it seems like many candidates are running by opposing another candidate, right? As opposed to running for issues. And there's a toxic environment, I believe, in politics right now. So how do we bring the conversation back to what it should be? And AARP represents the interests of the 50-plus community, and you've mentioned several times several issues. What are the issues that AARP considers to be 50-plus issues, and why are they important, and why is it important that we all as a country, and especially politicians, turn their ears and eyes and their whole being to these issues as opposed to being literally fighting?
Well, we've got Medicare, and Medicare is a huge, important program to American families, and it's not going to have enough money to pay all the bills that it owes unless some changes are made in the program. And that's happened before. Congress has made changes so that it could pay 100% of what it's supposed to cover, and they need to do it again. That's one issue. Social Security is in the same situation. Millions of American families rely on Social Security. We've all been paying into it from our paychecks throughout our working lives. It's in social insurance, and it needs Congress to make some adjustments in it so that it, in the future, can pay 100% of what it's promised to pay. There's another issue of prescription drugs. Americans are paying the highest prescription drug prices in the world. There's no reason for that other than we can't get control because our political system is broken, and these parties need to work together. They need to hear from the voters, and that's why the older voters are important. These politicians go out, they have meetings in the public, and they like us to talk about issues that are not the most important issues. So we need people to bring up Social Security, Medicare, prescription drugs. And one other issue is caregiving. Lupe mentioned that a little bit earlier, that the real backbone of care for older people when they can no longer live on their own independently.
Why should the government and we care about caregiving and make it?
Well, let me
basically asking or forcing congressmen to pay attention. What is the essence of caregiving?
Let's say an older couple are in their home, and we all have this going on in our neighborhoods, and they're getting increasingly unable to care for themselves, so their families are taking care of them. And that can be a 24/7 issue. And the average family caregiver spends over $7,000 a year out of their own pocket on those expenses, in addition to the income of the older couple. Now, what about a tax break, an income tax break for that family caregiver, so that the impact on their family, their children, and their living expenses is less? We ran a bill like that in the legislature this year. It made it through the Arizona legislature. It made it through the House, and we're looking forward to getting it through the Senate next year. That's an issue politicians should pay attention to.
That's true, and I think that's why the campaign is so intent on bringing these before, not just before the voters, but before the candidates, because they cannot ignore the fact that these are dire needs that families have, and they need to be held accountable for their actions. They can't just say to you one thing when they're running and then do something else when they're in office.
And another issue, David, is access. Here in Arizona, access is the system that pays for people to be in nursing homes. If you think Medicare is going to pay for you to be in a nursing home, you're sadly mistaken if you have to move in there and live there. If you just need to be in it for a few days in rehab after you've been in a hospital, Medicare covers that.
Or even long-term care services. It doesn't even have to be in a nursing home, right? Access will Altex, obviously in Arizona, will pay for it, but that's critical.
And with access, most of that is paid by the federal government, and that's another one that they're targeting for cuts. And if you have to live in a nursing home, believe me, at the cost nowadays, $3,000 a month, $2,000 a month,
so if that's
your money won't last long.
Is that the reason?
Really
Go ahead, Lupe.
Higher. It's really a lot higher. It's more like $5,000 to $6,000 a month. So yes, definitely families. Very few families could afford to foot that bill.
So that's another issue that we need both the Arizona politicians to pay attention to and strengthen that system, and the federal ones to make sure that the money's there, because people don't have any choice.
Now those are real issues, and no wonder why AARP is so concerned that politicians are distracted by running negative campaigns and by running against another candidate as opposed to running for this critical issues, which I can see that these issues are literally budget issues. These are money issues that if they're not addressed, we may hit crisis soon.
Yeah, and for some, they're life and death issues. You know, just
Right.
stop and think, for example, that when a person gets so frail that they need assistance, they don't want to leave to go to a nursing home or to an assisted living facility. They want to be independent for as long as they can. And there are programs at the local level, such as home delivered meals, you know, assistance with bathing, with whatever, that are not being taken care of because those funds are almost gone.
There's waiting lists.
There's waiting lists,
Around the state.
and the area agencies who provide these services are not able to provide them because they don't have enough money. Now, for every person that you help at home, when they end up going into a nursing home, not only is it costing the family, it's costing government, because
Right.
ultimately they end up on the access program, and that's at government cost.
So that's even more expensive. If instead of, I suppose that the better option would be to help them to stay
Help them
out
at
of
home.
those nursing homes, help them at home, so that because once they hit the nursing home, then the cost just skyrockets.
It
Wow.
really does. And like I said before, it's just not a matter of dollars. It's also a matter of dignity and of people being where they can best be and where their families can help you. Once I put you in a nursing home, and let's say that I find one that's 15 miles away, how often can I be there to see my mother? You know, if I'm a working woman. Or how long can I work if I have to stop working so that I can take
Right.
care of you? As Steve was saying, how many hours a week or a day?
Well,
I mean, it's considerable.
Yeah.
So the more assistance we can provide to the family to take care of that person, to help those people live independently, the better off we all are as a community.
You know, David, you keep using this word negative campaigning, and you're right about that. And the reason politicians do that is because it works. It works to tear down your opponent. I think we saw that in the last presidential election, how effective that is. And you know what happens when candidates tear down the opponent? The opponent's voters don't go to the polls. They have less enthusiasm for their candidate,
Wow.
so the candidate gets less votes. That's how negative campaigning works, and that's why it's used so much. In fact, the minute you run for office, the political parties have operatives, that's the big word, which are people that go and go through every bit of your past and try and dig up dirt that can be used against you.
Wow. You know, Lupe, Steve, and even myself, we are associated with AARP. Lupe as a volunteer, you, Steve, and I as staff. But now I see how critical this campaign is. I mean, somebody needs to basically point everyone to a direction of issues that are so critical. If now we're going to be distracted and these issues are not going to get addressed.
Correct.
So it's so critical that, we're vested, we are part of AARP, but if you're listening to us, please join the campaign. It's basically focusing on these issues and advocating for these issues. And Steve, AARP has a website, and I think that's where everything's going to be housed.
Yes, that's
everything's.
right.
What is that website?
AARP.org is where to go, and you'll see explanations of these very important issues: Social Security, Medicare, access, home caregiving. These issues are the issues that older voters should consider in the forefront of their thinking when they decide who to vote for, who will handle these responsibly, and whose will be effective. We've become such a tribal country. We've got our own TV stations that we watch and our own radio, and we only get the kind of information we want to hear, and that's mirrored in our political process.
Wow.
How are we going to get these guys to work together? And the older voters are key. They know people vote, and if the older voters demand it, it will work.
So it is critical that, we have to put our partisan aside and focus on these issues. I believe, Steve, that if folks who are listening add /vote, it will take them straight to the campaign.
AARP.org
Right.
/vote.
Correct. AARP.org /vote. It takes them straight to the campaign. Be the difference. Vote. So it's going to take a lot of people, Lupin, and I am so glad that AARP is as powerful as it is in getting messages across because of all these avenues that it's got. But it's going to take that and even more to reshift the conversation.
And we've always really been involved in the electoral process in the sense that we've always provided information. What do the candidates think about X, Y, and Z? Medicare, Social Security. What do they propose to do? But then again, sometimes they don't answer because they don't want to be tied to what they said on paper.
Right.
So it's important for us as an individual, as the voter, to stay informed, to seek the press that talks about what are they doing, what are they really saying, how are they adhering to what they promise? And it's about accountability ultimately, but it's up to us to hold them accountable, and we start at the voting booth.
Right. So I suppose, Steve, if people join the pledge, because by going to AARP.org /vote, and I already did it, you are able to take the pledge, and simply means that you recognize the needs, you recognize the issues, and that you take a pledge to vote in the midterm elections. But I suppose that in that page, they will find way more information, and they will be able to receive more information as to when they could contact their legislators and so on and so forth.
Yeah,
Correct?
that's right. They'll get information on that, and they'll get information on the issues, too. And the encouragement that voting in this off-year election, an election where the president is not running, is as important as voting in the elections where the president does. That's why we name the campaign Be the Difference, Vote.
Yeah, I never realized how critical the midterm election is. The impression that I'm getting today is way deeper than what I thought, especially what you explained about how the House of Representatives picks the Speaker of the House and the committee members and all that. That is critical.
And the whole House.
And the whole House. And then, of course,
Right,
locally,
sure.
we have a governor. The governor will be elected. Not elected, but the race will take place. There will be a race on the governor of Arizona.
As well as, people like the utility regulators. 2 of those
Right.
5 seats are up this time. And, the big utilities have put in for rate increases.
Yeah. We're going to have to do another show soon to
there we
explain how critical each of these fields or offices are. Stay with us. We're going to go on our last break. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. We'll be right back.
Welcome to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. Educate. Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Thank you. Thank you for staying with us. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. I am your host, David Parra. With us is Lupe Solis, community advocate, and Steve Jennings, the director of advocacy for AARP in Arizona. We are addressing a very critical subject today. It's a campaign launched by AARP earlier this month. It's called Be the Difference, Vote. We're really reaching out to the whole country pretty much because, see, a lot of times we're here in Arizona, but you need to realize that AARP has a state office in every state of the country. So what's happening in Arizona,
territories.
of course, and what's happening in Arizona is happening in every state. So this campaign is being run and launched in every state of the country. So I do believe we're going to have some good results in reshifting the conversation to these so critical issues, and with all the tools and avenues that we have internally here at AARP. I would like to ask also, because I know that there is another component about this campaign, Steve. First of all, it's a partnership with Politico. Would you explain to us who is Politico and what is this partnership about?
Well, it's about educating voters, and Politico reaches a lot of people. If you're interested in politics in Washington and would like to follow it a little bit closer online, go to Politico, Politico.
Well, that's a Spanish word, so that should be easy for Spanish speakers, right, to know.
Right.
Politico, right?
And they're teaming up with AARP to educate voters, and Politico has a magazine, and they're going to launch a series next month in June on a number of the issues that are important to older voters, and the intricacies of the issues and how the politicians are lining up on it. Politico is pretty focused on what the politicians are doing and why, and it's kind of up to the minute stuff. So
and it's a very
I
trusted
actually look
source.
at it daily. How often do you look at it?
Not daily,
Lupe?
but I look at it
Yeah.
weekly.
So what
almost.
is the implication to congressmen when they know about this partnership that AARP has with Politico? Does that add to more power to the effort?
It certainly tells them that AARP is not only organized, but is looking to new ways to reach out to the voter.
If you watch the news every day, if you watch the evening news on TV, which fewer and fewer people are, but it's still pretty powerful, you look at the issues they bring up and what they're talking about, and that's what the politicians are reacting to. So the question for a group like AARP and for us and our volunteers and for older people is, how do we drive our issues into that sphere of public discussions where the politicians have to deal with them?
Right.
And that's what politics is. How do you make more noise than the other guy so that they have to address you?
Of course.
And
Now, go ahead,
And
Lupe.
that's particularly important because, next month we'll be celebrating the 53rd anniversary of Medicare. And not too long after that, the 83rd anniversary of Social
53rd Medicare, 83rd anniversary Social Security.
Correct.
Wow.
And if we want to see these programs remain strong, we need to effect changes now. For too long, they've deferred them. These things had been discussed since the late 80s of what we needed to do, and if we had done things then, the changes would have been so minuscule that people would not have felt them. Now it's important to act now because we can't just keep rolling the ball forward for somebody else to take care of.
They use the term "kick the can down the road," right, Steve? In
Right,
politics,
yeah.
sometimes. In other words, don't deal with the issue; let somebody else later deal with it. Before we move into that issue arena again, because I think it's so critical, Steve. Going back to the partnership with Politico. The deciders. What is that deciders? Is that
That's Politico's term for it, and for the
the
issues,
magazine?
Well, and their magazine's online,
Okay,
and in hard copy. If you go to Washington, there's newsstands that have Politico on them. But
so
in
there
the
will be
rest of the country, not so much.
an effort. By Politico and AARP called The Deciders. Is that going to
right.
be like a magazine? Is that online, a publication?
It's going to be a series of issues that they are multi-format and how
Right.
they're brought forward and explained. Yeah,
They're
and what
going
the
to be-
politics of them are.
They're going to be describing the 50-plus voter population. Who are they? What issues concern them, etc. Who votes? Who doesn't vote?
That's
So
right. And what you need to do to fix Social Security and Medicare.
Right.
And
even
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Even they're going to go deeper into that.
That's
too.
right.
Good.
And hopefully reminding all voters that, as I said before, the issue is important to the mature older worker, and not just important to the mature older worker. It's just as important to the family that when somebody retires and has no Social Security, no Medicare, what will
or only Social
or
Security.
only Social
it's not
Security.
enough. Yeah.
It's
Right.
not enough. So families, every voter should be very concerned about this.
Right. These issues are so critical that it almost makes you mad to see politicians distracted, fighting among themselves when the house is burning. Almost. I mean, I'm being a little bit more dramatic, but in a sense, it is burning. There's just very critical issues that need to be addressed. Medicare, one of them. Social Security, Medicaid, caregiving, prescription drugs is so expensive. And look, they're just distracted doing other things. No wonder why AARP is running this campaign. This is going to be a critical campaign, I think.
It is. And remember, people have to remember Social Security is not just for retirees.
Mm-hmm.
It's also for families where the breadwinner or the Social Security person that was covered has passed and died and has left children, they're covered until age 18. It's also for those who unfortunately suffer some kind of physical or mental disability and have to be helped throughout life. So it's a matter of importance to all Americans.
And you know how Congress has dealt with that in the past is they've had a bipartisan group of them. You appoint a group of senators from each party
Commission.
and House members, and they have meetings, and they look at all the different ways to fix this problem, and they create consensus or agreement among themselves, and then they go back to their respective houses, their House or the Senate, and they tell the members, this is what we figured out, and they enact that. They vote for that, and the president signs it. And
Unfortunately, the partisanship in these past few elections has been such that people seem to be more interested in just attacking each other instead of looking at what unites us. And there's so many things that unite us rather than divide us, that we should be concentrating on that and holding our politicians accountable for the issues that affect us all.
Right. And, you know, I just wanted to say that this campaign, Be the Difference Vote, if I got it right, the Spanish translation is Sé la diferencia, vota. We will have information in Spanish also on the website, aarp.org/vota.
And you don't have to be a member to go to go to that website, www.aarp.org/vote is available to everyone.
Right. And one more thing, Steve. The website again is aarp.org/vote. Let's in the few minutes that we have left. So when it comes to Medicare, the issue is funding, and if the issue is the changes that potentially need to be made, including Social Security, then that may end up in reduction of benefits or increase of costs, I assume.
Well, there's a lot of misinformation going all around about it. And, for example, Social Security, if you make no changes in Social Security, it will spend up its reserves. And at that point, it will, the best estimates are, it will be able to pay 75% of what it owes to people.
I think 2034 is the estimated year.
Yeah, and if the economy improves, that date moves off into the future because more people, more money flows into the system. But it won't be broke. That's what politicians like to say, to stampede people into doing something radical. Look, this system has worked great now, like you say, for 80-some years, and there's no reason it can't work for 80 more as long as, you know, the politicians pay attention to it.
And the law requires that the program be solvent for 75 years.
Right.
So minor tweaks would be able to do that.
And this is not part of the budget in the sense that we have money deducted from our paychecks and our employers match it, and it goes into a special fund. And so why shouldn't this system be solvent? Medicare is a little bit different, but it's got the same issues. You know, medical costs have been going up so much. People are living longer. There's new expensive treatments that tend to be applied at the end of life. And so the system needs to be tinkered with and adjusted. And also, frankly, Medicare's benefit structure is out of date. You know, more and more we're not staying in the hospital. We get pills from our doctors and sent home. So why doesn't Medicare cover long-term care in the home like Medicaid is doing? But, you know, we need a review of the structure of Medicare. These are all issues that Congress is built to handle if they'll quit fighting and work together.
And obviously the issue of caregiving, the more they support the home and community-based services, the less the families have to eventually move their loved one into a nursing home where it's really expensive. So that's also critical that they fund Medicaid, and then that especially the home and community-based services.
And that they help the taxpayer to take care of their loved ones. Because remember, caregiving isn't just about older people. There are many children out there who require full-time care. There's also young adults who get injured in accidents or for whatever reason. At work. And so sometimes families are really, really stretched to take care of them at home. And when they no longer can do that, they have to send them to a nursing home. And that's very costly.
For
very
the
costly.
taxpayers, it's very
Right.
costly.
Very costly for them.
And then prescription drugs. I mean, they are just so expensive. I mean, I get phone calls. My number is around pretty much the country. I get calls from other states, and some of the calls are people concerned with the cost of prescription drugs, and that also needs to be addressed, Steve, right?
Yeah, and there's solutions like why can't you bring in drugs from other countries where they're much cheaper? Because the country negotiates. Why can't Medicare negotiate with these big drug companies? When you have a large group of people, that's what these big health plans, United Healthcare and all these giant health plans, Cigna do. They negotiate with these drug people and they get the price down because they say, if you don't, we have 35 million members, and if you don't lower your price on this drug, we'll buy a very similar drug from another company. And so there's no reason Medicare couldn't do that if these politicians will give it the authority to do that.
Right. Okay, we have about 45 seconds to end. What would be the final word? I know this is a very critical campaign, but just final thoughts, Lupe, Steve?
Well, I would say that, again, a reminder that it's extremely important that you remain involved, that you remember that this is an important election coming up, that is one that may decide policies that will affect your family for years and years to come. And that given the current state of political animosity in the country, that it's important that 50-plus voter bloc go forward and do their duty.
Right. 5 seconds, Steve.
Don't get distracted. Keep your eyes on these Social Security and Medicare and be the difference. Vote.
Thank you. Well, and with that, this was AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. Have a great week.